Okay. I have to be completely honest with you before we even really start this deep dive today.
Uh-oh. Confessions right out of the gate.
Yeah, pretty much. So, um, when I first looked at the stack of notes and the source material for today, I genuinely thought there had been some sort of mix-up. I'm sitting here holding a book, the extensive notes on a book called Dance with the Elephant. And, my immediate reaction was, great, we're finally doing that deep dive on circus animals I've been asking for.
You were really hoping for a breakdown of, like, peanut consumption and trunk dexterity, weren't you?
I was. Or, maybe a nice heartwarming memoir about a zookeeper. Because it sounds like something you would find in the children's section right next to Babar or Curious George.
Right.
But then I actually started reading the summary, and I quickly realized that this is decidedly not that.
No, it's
Yeah.
decidedly not about the circus. Although, to be fair to the authors, Dwayne Kuss and Don Calhoun, they do use the elephant as this central anchoring metaphor. But you are right, the title is a bit of a Trojan horse. You open the gates expecting a parade, and what steps out is a very serious, very dense philosophical text about the end of the world as we know it.
It's a massive bait and switch, but in a totally fascinating way. Because today we are looking at a text that deals with what the authors call the highest stakes imaginable. We are talking about literal planetary survival. But, and this is the weird thing, the book didn't actually start out that way, did it?
That is the most interesting part of this entire deep dive for me. We aren't just analyzing a finished static book today. We are looking at a text that is actively mutating. So, Dance with the Elephant was originally written as a pretty standard self-help guide.
Like a personal growth manual.
Exactly. It was about how to deal with personal trauma. Things like divorce, the death of a parent, navigating grief. The elephant in the room in that original context was simply the heavy emotional stuff we don't want to talk about in our private lives.
Right. The elephant was that awkward silence at Thanksgiving or the secret you're keeping from your spouse.
Spot on. But as the author's Dwayne, who describes himself as this intellectual explorer with 16 different careers, and Don, who is a memorial counselor, a real people guy, as they started looking at the actual state of the world today, they had a realization.
Who kind of realization?
They realized that writing a book about how to be happy while the biosphere itself is collapsing it felt grossly insufficient.
Like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic.
A bit, yeah. So they are currently in the process of rewriting the entire framework of their own book. They are pivoting from what they call self-help to a new concept they've coined, systems health.
I really want to pause on that because that is a massive, massive pivot. Usually self-help is, and I don't mean this in a totally bad way, but it's extremely narcissistic.
It is entirely inward focused.
Exactly. It's about me. How do I fix my anxiety? How do I get that big promotion? How do I get over my divorce? It feels like a huge conceptual leap to go from here is how to fix your marriage to here is how to fix the climate. I mean, is that even a valid comparison?
It sounds like a stretch, right?
Yeah. Can you really use the exact same tools for a broken heart that you use for a broken planet?
That is the million-dollar question for us today. And honestly, I was highly skeptical at first, too, because it sounds a little arrogant. I fixed my relationship issues, so now I'll just go ahead and solve global warming.
Yeah, quite the leap in logic.
But the author's core argument is that the root cause of both issues is actually exactly the same. They argue that personal healing is now fundamentally inseparable from planetary stewardship. You simply cannot be a healthy person on a sick planet.
So if the house is actively burning down, it doesn't really matter how well organized your bedroom closet is.
Precisely. And they go even deeper than that. They argue that the way we collectively treat the Earth is identical to the way we treat people in highly dysfunctional, toxic relationships. They actually say we are gaslighting the biosphere.
Gaslighting the biosphere. Wow. That is a heavy term.
But think about it. The Earth is basically screaming at us. We see the superstorms, the unprecedented heat waves, the dying coral reefs. The partner in this relationship, the Earth, is loudly saying, I am hurting, my systems are failing, I cannot keep doing this.
And the other partner?
The other partner is our global economic system. And that system is standing there saying, you're fine, you're overreacting, stop being so dramatic, we're just going to drill a little more oil, clear a little more forest, you can take it.
Geez. When you put it exactly that way, that is a textbook toxic relationship.
It is, and that is exactly why the self-help tools actually do apply, because the elephant has changed. In the original version of the book, the elephant was your personal repressed secret. In the rewrite, the elephant is what they call the global shadow. It is the metacrisis.
Okay, let's unpack that bit of jargon for a second. Metacrisis.
Yeah.
I hear this term thrown around a lot in intellectual podcasts and articles, and it usually just seems to mean everything is bad all at once.
Hmm.
But how are Kuss and Calhoun specifically defining it in their work?
They define it as the overlapping, catastrophic convergence of multiple global crises. It's not just climate change in a vacuum, it's the social fragmentation, the spiritual ache of modern life, the economic instability, and the ecological collapse, all feeding into and accelerating each other.
It's like a hydra.
Exactly like a hydra. You manage to cut off one head, and two more appear somewhere else. And central to this entire metacrisis concept is a specific biological and economic term, ecological overshoot.
Which is really just a fancy way of saying we are buying things on a cosmic credit card we can't afford.
In a caloric, resource-based sense, yes. We are currently consuming physical resources way faster than the Earth can biologically regenerate them. The authors use a very specific, very visceral metaphor to explain this to the reader. They say humanity is currently consuming the apple seed.
Consuming the apple seed. Let's break that down.
Right. So if you're hungry, you eat the apple. That's fine. That is nature functioning as intended. But if you are greedy, or if you are completely desperate and not thinking ahead at all, you eat the seed too.
And if you eat the seed, you don't get an apple tree next year.
You end the cycle entirely. You have essentially eaten the future to satisfy the present moment.
And that brings us right back to the new elephant. The elephant is our collective denial of this exact fact.
Yes, they term it collective death denial. Look, in our personal lives, we constantly deny that we are going to die. We put off making wills. We refuse to talk about funerals with our aging parents. In our collective cultural life, we are denying the end of the extraction era.
We're pretending we can just pull infinite resources from a decidedly finite planet forever.
We are refusing to look at the X-rays.
So really, the mission of this deep dive today,
Yeah.
and the central mission of the author's massive rewrite, is to force us to take those blinders off. To stop looking at just my divorce or my career or my bank account and start looking at our collective survival.
Because the stakes simply couldn't be any higher.
Now, to help the reader navigate this, the authors don't just, give us a motivational pep talk. They actually provide a very structured framework. And if you've listened to this show before, you know I absolutely love a good framework, especially when it involves a formula. They call this framework life's cosmic equation.
It sounds very grand, doesn't it?
It really does. And I want to visualize this for everyone listening right now. Just imagine a mathematical equation written on a blackboard. You have a set of parentheses. Inside those parentheses, there are three distinct variables being added together. Then you close the parentheses, and you multiply that entire sum by a fourth variable.
Right, so it's variable A plus variable B plus variable C, all multiplied by variable D.
Specifically, the formula is this: creative power plus receptive choice plus faith. Take that sum and multiply it by time, and that equals your cosmic legacy.
It looks like a simple high school algebra problem on the surface. But what Kuss and Calhoun do is take each one of those individual variables and show how they completely change their meaning when you switch your perspective from self-help the Me Too systems health the we.
So that is our roadmap for today's deep dive. We are going to go through this cosmic equation, variable by variable. We're going to see how creative power isn't just about painting a nice picture or writing a song anymore, and how time isn't just about checking your watch or managing your calendar. Let's start right inside the parentheses with the first variable, creative power.
In the original text, creative power was pretty standard self-help fare. It was defined as that unique inner spark, your personal talent, the specific thing that makes you special and drives you forward.
We could call it the stardust concept, right?
Yes. And they actually mean that quite literally. They remind the reader that the iron currently pumping in our blood, the calcium making up our teeth, the carbon forming our genes, all of it was physically forged in the violent collapse of massive stars billions of years ago. We are, on a literal chemical level, recycled stardust.
Which is a genuinely beautiful thought. It makes you feel incredibly big. It makes you feel connected to the vastness of the universe.
It really does. And in the traditional self-help context, accessing that stardust energy is all about recharging your personal battery so you can just keep grinding through your daily life. And there is a story in the notes about one of the authors, Don Calhoun, that illustrates this perfectly. It takes place way back in 1979, and it involves, of all people, Elton John.
I love this story so much because it is profoundly relatable. So set the scene for us. Don isn't a published philosophical author at this point in his life.
No, far from it. He's just a young man, but he is already carrying the weight of the entire world on his shoulders. He is the primary, full-time caregiver for his mother, Edie. And Edie is very sick. She has a brain tumor. She has completely lost her sight, and she is permanently bedridden.
I want to just pause on that image for a second.
Yeah.
Because being a full-time caregiver for a dying parent is brutal. It's the constant smell of rubbing alcohol and old medicine in the house. It's the heavy darkness of the room because the light physically hurts her eyes. It's the profound silence.
It's the sheer physical exhaustion of having to lift another human being just to help them turn over.
Exactly. It drains you completely on every conceivable level.
It really hollows you out. So Don is running on completely empty. He desperately needs a break. And he manages to get away for one single rare night off to go to the Northrop Auditorium in Minneapolis because Elton John is playing. And remember, this is 1979 Elton John.
Oh, man. He is at the absolute peak of his stadium rock powers.
Exactly. The wild glasses, the sequin costumes, the raw electric energy. Don walks into this arena packed with 4,800 other screaming people. The lights finally go down, the piano music starts, and the entire place just erupts. Elton is pounding the keys, screaming out the lyrics, and the massive crowd is screaming it right back. It is this massive, overwhelming injection of energy. Don describes it in the book as feeling his personal battery physically recharge. He feels alive again. He feels that stardust.
And that is the creative power working perfectly in the old model. You go to the concert, you get the emotional high, you feel better about your life. But, and here's a massive caveat, then the concert actually ends.
But that is the tragic catch. You walk out of the auditorium doors, the ringing in your ears slowly fades, you drive home in the dark, quiet car, you unlock your front door and walk back into your house. And the heavy smell of the medicine is still lingering there. Your mother is still blind in the other room. The tumor is still growing.
The incredible energy of the concert didn't change the objective reality of his situation one bit.
No, it didn't. It was basically a temporary emotional drug. It allowed him to personally endure the terrible situation for a few more days, but it didn't heal the situation itself. And that is the fundamental limitation of the me version of creative power. It's just a temporary battery recharge for the individual machine.
So how exactly does the systems health rewrite change this dynamic? Because if the world itself is the sick mother, if the earth is the dying patient, going to an Elton John concert isn't going to fix the climate crisis.
Right, and the authors make a brilliant, challenging pivot here. They tell the reader, being chemically connected to the stars is nice, but it is simply not enough anymore. We must be biologically connected to the soil.
From stardust to soil dust.
Exactly. They introduce a brand new term for this updated variable, biophilic energy.
Biophilia, that's the biologist E.O. Wilson's term, isn't it? The love of life.
Yes, exactly. It's the innate biological tendency of human beings to seek deep connections with nature and other forms of life. The authors argue that we have spent decades trying to recharge our batteries with highly artificial things. Stadium concerts, retail therapy, getting likes on our social media feeds. But our batteries aren't digital, they are biological. They can only truly be recharged by the biology of the earth itself. The nitrogen, the carbon, the smell of rain hitting the pavement, the physical feel of dirt in your hands.
So in this new framework, instead of using your creative power to get a promotion at a corporate job or build a personal brand online, what are you supposed to use it for?
You use it for cosmic restoration. The fundamental question of your life shifts from how can I use my specific talent to get rich and famous to how can my specific talent actively regenerate the local ecosystem I actually live in?
Okay, give me a tangible example of that. Because you and I are sitting in a studio, and not everyone listening is a botanist or a park ranger or a regenerative farmer. Dwayne Kuss, the other author, he's a self-described grease monkey, right? He likes fixing old cars.
Right. Dwayne describes himself as this intellectual explorer, but his core underlying talent is figuring out how complex systems work, literally under the hood. In the old self-help model, he uses that mechanical talent to fix a broken carburetor or maybe build a lucrative consulting business.
Standard American dream stuff.
Sure. But in the new systems health model, he has to apply that exact same analytical systems-based mind to sustainable ecological systems. So he asks, how do we fix the local water table in our county? How do we repair our community's food infrastructure so it isn't entirely dependent on fossil fuel-heavy supply chains?
It goes right back to the apple seed metaphor. The seed, which represents your personal talent, has to actually be planted in the soil.
Yep.
If you just keep the seed in your pocket to admire it, or if you try to plant it in a concrete parking lot, nothing is ever going to grow.
Precisely. The core takeaway for variable 1 is this. Your spark, your talent, doesn't actually belong to you. It belongs to the biosphere. You are just the temporary vessel for it.
Okay, so let's say we agree with that. We have that biophilic energy, we are grounded in the soil, we are ready to do the work. But having energy without having a direction is just pure chaos. You still need to steer the ship. And that brings us to the second variable inside the parentheses of our equation, receptive choice.
Which the authors vividly describe as the rudder of your ship.
Now, in the original version of the book, receptive choice was basically about filtering your personal perceptions. It was very much aligned with modern Stoicism, really. The idea that you absolutely cannot control what external events happen to you, but you possess the ultimate power to control how you react to them. And to really explain this concept, we have to talk about Dwayne's divorce. And I have to say, the specific phrase he uses in the notes to describe this event, it practically jumped off the page at me.
Ah, yes. The lesbian divorce knife.
Yeah, that is extremely vivid.
It is, but it perfectly reflects the sheer psychological violence and the shock of what happened to him. To understand the choice part of the variable, you really have to understand the depth of the trauma first. Dwayne had been happily married, or so he thought, for 12 years. They had 2 kids. He thought he completely understood his life's narrative arc. He knew exactly how the story was going to end, and then, completely abruptly, his wife leaves him.
And not just leaves him for another guy. She leaves him for a woman on her recreational softball team.
Right. And you have to put this in the context of the time it happened. That must have been a massive double blow to his ego and his worldview. It wasn't just the painful rejection, it was the utter confusion of his reality shattering.
A total collapse of his personal narrative.
Complete collapse. Dwayne talks very candidly about the concept of the sunk cost. He had heavily invested 12 prime years of his life, his deepest emotions, his finances, his identity into this one marriage. And suddenly, he felt like it was all a total, irredeemable waste. He felt like the ultimate victim. He deeply felt the public shame of it all.
The sunk cost fallacy is such a powerful human trap. It's that nagging feeling of, I absolutely cannot let go of this massive mistake because I spent so much time and effort making it.
Exactly. But here is where the concept of receptive choice actually kicks in. Dwayne was standing amidst the smoking wreckage of his marriage. He had a choice. He could choose to remain a victim forever, to hold on to that bitter anger and twist that knife for the rest of his life. Or he could reach out and grab the rudder.
He could accept the new, painful reality.
Yes. He could say, okay, this objectively happened. My wife is living her actual truth now. This isn't actually about me failing as a man. It's about her needing something fundamentally different to be happy.
He actively had to move his mindset from judgment to understanding, just so he could effectively co-parent his 2 kids.
He had to manually steer his ship out of the raging storm, rather than just letting the waves smash his life against the rocks.
That is a deeply moving, incredibly powerful personal story. But again, I'm going to play the role of the skeptic for our listeners here. That is a story about a marriage. That is a dispute between 2 individual people. How in the world does receptive choice apply to the macro level of the metacrisis? Because the global storm we are sailing in right now isn't an emotional dispute with an ex-spouse. It's melting ice caps and collapsing supply chains.
The transition here is brilliant. The authors call the planetary application of this decoupling from the matrix, and they draw a stark, direct parallel. Humanity as a whole is currently going through a traumatic collective divorce from the industrial fossil fuel world.
A collective divorce. I really like that framing.
Think about it closely. We have been happily married to fossil fuels for over 200 years. We have an unfathomably massive sunk cost. We built the interstate highways, the sprawling suburbs, the massive coal plants, the entire globalized economy, all based on this one relationship. We deeply love the convenience. We love the cheap, easy energy.
And now suddenly the relationship is turning incredibly toxic.
Exactly. The lesbian divorce knife in this global scenario is the incoming climate science. The hard data is coming in every single day and telling us plainly, this era is over. This relationship is literally killing you. And our collective cultural reaction is exactly the same as Dwayne's initial reaction was. We are in deep denial. We are furiously angry. We are constantly bargaining. We say things like, well, maybe if we just switch every single vehicle to an electric car, we can keep the exact same suburban lifestyle forever without changing our habits.
We are desperately trying to save the marriage, even though the partner, the stable Holocene climate we evolved in, has already packed its bags and moved out.
That's a great way to put it. So receptive choice in the massive planetary sense is the conscious, difficult decision to legally accept the divorce. It means willingly adopting what they call a post-growth mindset.
What does a post-growth mindset actually look like practically for you and me? Because to a lot of people, post-growth just sounds like a fancy way of saying everyone is going to get significantly poorer.
That is exactly the fear speaking. That is the victim mindset, holding on to the old marriage. Post-growth means deliberately steering your life away from the culturally mandated thou shalts of modern consumerism.
Thou shalt buy a bigger house than your parents had.
Right. Thou shalt fly to Bali for the weekend to post it online. Post-growth means completely redefining what wealth actually is. Instead of the endless material accumulation of stuff, true wealth becomes community connection, having free time, and building ecological resilience in your local neighborhood.
The authors introduce another term here that I think is incredibly vital for understanding this transition: solastalgia.
It is a profoundly beautiful, deeply tragic word. You know nostalgia, that's the familiar pain of missing a home you physically left behind. Solastalgia is the specific psychic pain of missing your home while you're still physically standing right in the middle of it because the environment of the home itself is drastically changing around you.
It's that feeling of looking out your living room window and realizing the snow just doesn't fall in December anymore like it did when you were a kid. Or realizing the local creek you used to catch frogs in is completely dried up and paved over.
Exactly. It is the unacknowledged grief of environmental change. And just like Dwayne had to deeply process the painful grief of his failed marriage to move forward with his life, we collectively have to process our solastalgia. We cannot keep pretending the climate isn't changing. Receptive choice means actively steering your emotional ship right into that grief, fully accepting it, and then taking real action.
There is another story in the notes, this one about Don's grandmother, that I think really brings this lofty concept of receptive choice back down to earth. Can you share that one?
Yes. This is the story they call bringing the earth home. Dawn's grandmother was actively dying. She required intense 24/7 care. Now, the heavy current of modern society, the easy expected path, was to simply put her in a medical nursing home. Because that's just what you do. It's economically efficient. It keeps the reality of death out of sight and out of mind for the rest of the family.
But Don and his family made a very different receptive choice.
They chose to bring her home. They set up a rented hospital bed right in the middle of their living room. They took on the messy, emotionally hard, deeply inefficient work of caring for her themselves. It was exhausting. It wasn't easy by any metric. But they knew it was right. It intimately connected them to the raw biological cycle of life and death.
And the parallel they're drawing to the planet is that we have essentially been treating the Earth like as the sick grandmother we shoved into the distant nursing home.
We have entirely outsourced the care of our habitat. We just casually say, oh, the federal government will pass a law to fix the environment, or some Silicon Valley tech billionaire will invent a machine to scrub all the carbon out of the sky. Receptive choice means officially bringing the Earth home. It means deciding today that we are the primary caregivers. We're going to do the messy, hard, unglamorous work of ecological restoration right in our own backyards, rather than waiting for some magical, painless solution from a faceless institution.
Okay, so looking at our equation, we have the engine, which is biophilic energy. We have the rudder, which is receptive choice. But here is the massive problem I always personally run into with this kind of stuff. You look at the actual data, the sheer terrifying Everest of the Metacrisis, and you just want to crawl into bed and pull the covers over your head. It feels entirely hopeless. Why even bother to steer the ship if you know it's probably going to sink anyway? And that agonizing feeling leads us directly to the third variable inside our parentheses: faith.
And this is arguably the most culturally misunderstood variable in the entire book. In the original self-help context, they were very careful to define faith not strictly as religious dogma, but as what they called bravery in the soul. It's having a predetermined moral roadmap for a destination you absolutely cannot prove actually exists.
Kind of like Dwayne and Don writing this book in the first place, right?
Yep.
Two normal guys from the Midwest, no massive publishing deal, no literary agent, just waking up and deciding, you know what, we have something urgent to say to the world.
Exactly. They simply had raw faith in their own message. But in the Systems Health Planetary Update, faith gets a massive necessary upgrade. They rename it Active Hope in the Dark, or my preferred term, Radical Hope.
How is radical hope fundamentally different from just being a cheerful optimist?
Hmm.
Because frankly, I feel like there's a ton of toxic positivity out there in the climate space. People saying, oh, don't worry, solar panels and wind turbines will seamlessly save our current way of life.
That is a crucial distinction to make. Optimism is simply a statistical prediction. An optimist looks at a set of data and says, I think the mathematical odds are good. I predict we are going to win this fight. But if you look honestly at the current climate data, if you look at the accelerating species extinction rates, the topsoil loss, an optimist would have to be either completely unread or clinically delusional.
Cool.
Or they would just instantly give up because the raw data is so incredibly bleak.
Right. So if it's not a prediction of victory, what is radical hope?
Radical hope is not a prediction at all. It is a firm moral stance. It is the conscious choice to do the right thing simply because it is the cosmic thing to do, regardless of what the final outcome might be, even if the odds are 99% certain failure.
So you go out and plant the sapling, even if you read a report that the entire forest might burn down in 10 years due to a mega drought.
You plant the tree because planting the tree is what a good steward does. You don't do it just for the shade you personally will enjoy in 20 years. You do it because the act itself aligns with the continuation of life. The authors use that analogy of climbing Mount Everest. The Metacrisis is the Everest of human problems. And our tiny individual actions, sorting our recycling, planting a community garden, voting in local elections, can honestly feel like trying to climb Mount Everest wearing flip-flops.
Which sounds completely laughably ridiculous. Why would you even take the first step off the base camp?
Because the only other alternative is sitting down in the snow at the bottom and freezing to death. Radical hope is the stubborn refusal to sit down and die. There is a deeply poetic destiny card question they ask in this section. Will you choose to dance even when the music gets heavy?
Will you dance even when the music is heavy? That naturally brings up the magical roller coaster story from Don. He talks about the terrifying experience of raising his kids.
Oh, this story resonates so deeply with absolutely every parent who reads it. When you first have a child, you are gripped by terror. You look out at the world, the systemic violence, the drug epidemics, the random car accidents, and you think in a panic, how can I possibly keep this fragile creature safe in this meat grinder of a world? You don't get an owner's manual when they hand you the baby at the hospital. But alongside that terror, you also see the profound magic. The first time they smile at you, their first wobbly step, the way they laugh. You have to learn to hold the sheer terror and the absolute magic in the exact same hand.
Because if you only ever focused on the terror of the statistics, you would lock them in a padded room and never let them leave the house.
Exactly. You would paralyze them. Faith, in the context of this cosmic equation, is the hard-won ability to look directly at the trauma of the modern world. The dying coral reefs, the burning forests, the microplastics in the rain, and still somehow see the magic of life that is fundamentally worth fighting for. Faith is the psychological life jacket that keeps your head above water and keeps you swimming when the old familiar maps of infinite economic growth have completely dissolved.
Okay, so let's zoom out and look at our equation again. Inside the parentheses we now have biophilic energy plus receptive choice plus radical hope. We have the required power, we have the ethical direction, and we have the spiritual will to keep going. But now we have to close those parentheses. We have to take that entire sum and multiply it by the final fourth variable.
Time, the ultimate multiplier.
And I have to admit, this is the part of the framework that really scares me. Because, just basic math, a multiplier amplifies absolutely everything inside those parentheses.
It does. It is ruthlessly impartial. If the sum of what is inside your personal parentheses is exactly zero, if you have absolutely zero connection to nature, zero direction in your choices, and zero hope, then time just endlessly amplifies your own emptiness. 0 times anything is still 0. But it gets worse. If the sum inside is negative, if your entire life is actively defined by mindless consumption, ecological destruction, and unchecked greed, then time multiplies that negative number into a generational disaster.
Now, in the original self-help book, Time was all about the popular concept of the power of now. Carpe diem, seize the day. And Don had a very unique perspective on this because of his day job. He was a memorial counselor, which is a polite way of saying he sold tombstones to grieving families.
Right, he had a daily front row seat to human mortality. He literally dealt with death every single day of his professional life. And he tells this incredibly heartbreaking story in the book about a kid named Miles.
Oh, the wrestling story. This one is genuinely tragic.
It is. Miles was this young, vibrant high school wrestler. He was the absolute picture of peak physical health. Strong, young, his whole limitless life stretching out ahead of him. One day, he stepped onto the wrestling mat for a standard match, and his heart simply stopped due to a completely undetected congenital defect. He was just gone, instantly.
Just snapped away. And the profound lesson Dawn took away from counseling that shattered family was, do not wait. If you want to tell someone I love you, say it right now. If you want to take that dream trip to Europe, put it on the card and take it now, because time is not guaranteed to anyone.
And look, that is genuinely valid, beautiful advice for a short, personal human life. But the system's health update complicates this seize the day narrative significantly. Because if seizing the day culturally means, well, I'm going to live like there is literally no tomorrow, so I'll consume everything I possibly want, buy the massive truck, and burn as much carbon as I can because I might drop dead on Tuesday, then you have accidentally become a planetary villain.
You are actively stealing resources from the unborn future to extravagantly fund your present carpe diem lifestyle.
Exactly. So to counter this, the authors introduce a concept borrowed from geology and ecology: deep time.
Deep time. Okay, this is where we have to get into what they call the plastic bottle math.
Ah, yes. This is the specific math equation that literally keeps me up at night now. Okay, so imagine you are on a road trip. You stop at a gas station and you buy a plastic bottle of soda. You open it, you drink it. How long does that take? Maybe 5 minutes?
Maybe 10 minutes if I'm really savoring it with a snack.
Okay, let's say 10 minutes. That 10 minutes is your creative power usage in the present moment. 10 minutes of personal consumption. But that physical plastic bottle you just tossed in the trash bin, it takes roughly 450 years to completely decompose in a landfill.
So the actual equation of that action is 10 minutes multiplied by 450 years.
That is a staggeringly massive negative legacy for one drink. Your 10 tiny minutes of sugary hydration creates a toxic physical scar on the planet that will outlast your great-great-great-grandchildren. That is the terrifying multiplier effect of time in the era of the Metacrisis. We are casually multiplying these tiny daily acts of consumer convenience into centuries of ecological pollution.
That is honestly horrifying when you sit with it. When you think about how many hundreds of bottles, how many single-use plastic bags, how many cheap cross-country flights we all take.
It is deeply overwhelming, but, and we have to hold on to this, the multiplier effect works in the exact opposite direction too. This is where the hope lives. If you spend a Saturday afternoon planting a native oak tree in your neighborhood, maybe it takes 1 hour of your time, that specific tree will actively generate oxygen, sequester carbon from the atmosphere, and provide crucial habitat for local birds and insects for the next 300 years. So that equation is 1 hour multiplied by 300 years. That is a massive, echoing, positive legacy.
This beautifully connects to the indigenous philosophy of the 7 generations, doesn't it?
Yes, the authors explicitly integrated this ancient wisdom into their modern framework. The core idea is that every major decision we make today must be carefully weighed against its projected impact 7 full generations from now. It forcefully shifts our cultural mindset from corporate time management like, how do I get more emails answered by 5 p.m. today, to real planetary stewardship.
There is a really provocative question the authors pose right at the end of this section that I want to read. They ask, if today's a good day to die, have you ensured that tomorrow is a good day for a child to be born?
That question just stops you dead in your tracks. A good death isn't just about achieving your own personal spiritual peace anymore. It's about looking closely at the state of the house you are leaving behind for the next tenants. Did you totally trash the place and steal the copper wiring before you moved out?
Don beautifully connects this to his own father, a man affectionately known as Ray Baby.
Yes, Ray Calhoun. He was a professional monument builder, just like Don became later. He worked his whole life in solid granite. He mentally lived and dealt in what he called stone time. He instilled in Don the belief that you have to build things that are physically designed to last. He called them stories in stone.
We currently live in this hyper-disposable Amazon Prime culture. Everything is single-use. Everything is made of cheap, brittle plastic designed to break in a year, so you buy another one. Thinking in stone time, actually considering what physical things will still be standing in 500 years, is a radically rebellious act today.
So when we finally run this full complex equation, biophilia plus post-growth acceptance plus radical hope, all of it multiplied by the massive scale of deep time, we arrive at the final result of the formula. Section 5, the cosmic legacy.
The legacy. the
Yeah.
final output of a human life.
Now, originally, in the self-help draft, your legacy was just the fond emotional memory you left behind in your friends' heads. He was such a nice guy at the office. She was a really dedicated mom, which, again, is a beautiful, necessary part of the human experience. But in the teeth of the metacrisis, it's just completely insufficient. The updated systems health legacy is your literal planetary footprint. Your legacy is physically, chemically etched into the parts per million carbon levels of the global atmosphere. It is permanently written in the toxic or healthy state of the local watershed you lived near. It is defined as biosphere viability.
So it's not just a warm memory fading in a photo album. It's a measurable, physical reality in the dirt.
It is. And to actually achieve a net positive cosmic legacy, the authors lay out what they call the ethos of interdependence. You can think of these as the fundamental rules of the dance. If you want to successfully dance with the elephant, which is the biosphere, you absolutely have to follow these specific steps.
Let's run through these 4 specific rules quickly because I really think they serve as the practical daily toolkit for the listener. Rule number 1, egocentric respect.
So, in the old days, respect simply meant being polite to other human beings, saying please and thank you. Now, in this framework, it means deeply respecting the beach, the biosphere itself. It means fundamentally respecting physical limits. You cannot negotiate a treaty with the laws of physics. You cannot argue politically with the melting point of glacial ice. You have to bow down and respect the hard carrying capacity of the Earth.
Rule number 2 is fascinating. They call it systemic trust.
This is the rule that really scares the hardcore doomsday preppers, because the prepper fantasy is to build an isolated concrete bunker, hoard canned beans, and shoot anyone who comes near their property line. But the authors fiercely argue for systemic trust instead, because as global supply chains inevitably start to bend and break down, and they will, we're already seeing it, who are you actually going to rely on?
You definitely can't eat a stack of gold bars in a bunker.
No, you can't. You have to rely on your literal neighbors. Systemic trust is actual survival trust. You need to know who on my street has the physical tools to fix a solar panel, who actually knows how to grow calorie-dense potatoes in the changing climate, who has the medical knowledge to set a broken arm when the hospital is overwhelmed. True community resilience is built entirely on deeply trusting the people physically around you, not on aggressively isolating yourself from them.
Which moves us to rule number 3, integrity, which they also subtitle the new confidentiality.
This one is all about radical truth-telling. It is having the raw social courage to speak the undeniable truth about the metacrisis when absolutely everyone else around you is desperately trying to ignore it. It's the refusal to quietly collude with the cultural silence. So when someone at a nice dinner party casually says, oh, don't worry, they'll invent a giant machine to suck all the carbon out of the air, let's just go ahead and book that massive cruise ship vacation, integrity is having the guts to politely but firmly say, actually, that's incredibly unlikely to happen in time. We fundamentally need to change how we live today.
Which is, frankly, a surefire way to never get invited back to that specific dinner party.
Oh, absolutely. You will be the ultimate buzzkill. But it is a necessary ethical act.
And finally, we have rule number 4, growth as deeper.
This is hands down my favorite concept in the whole book because it directly challenges our toxic global addiction to endless economic growth. The authors use this incredible caterpillar metaphor. Think about a caterpillar. It hatches and it just grows bigger and bigger and bigger. It blindly consumes every single green leaf in sight. It is essentially just an eating machine, but at a very specific biological point, it has to stop.
Because if it didn't stop eating, it would just become this giant, monstrous, eventually immobile caterpillar that starves to death anyway.
Right. It absolutely has to stop its physical growth in order to begin its transformational growth. It has to stop eating, build a dark chrysalis, and literally disintegrate its own body into a genetic soup. It has to entirely die to its old, consuming form in order to miraculously become a butterfly.
And the metaphor is that humanity is currently the bloated caterpillar.
We have eaten almost everything. We are globally fat. We are ecologically bloated. We have consumed the forests and the oceans. We collectively have to stop our physical, material growth, stop relentlessly extracting and consuming more stuff so that we can finally begin our spiritual, relational, and intellectual growth. The ultimate goal, the new American dream, if you will, is to build a life that is ecologically small but spiritually vast.
Ecologically small, spiritually vast. I genuinely think that should be the defining motto for humanity in the 21st century.
It absolutely has to be, or we won't make it to the 22nd.
Before we completely wrap up this deep dive, there is one final, very personal story in the notes that I think offers a crucial path to redemption. Because honestly, reading all this, a lot of us just feel intense guilt. We feel like we are the inherent bad guys. We're the ones who drove the gas-guzzling cars, we bought the cheap plastic junk, we lived the caterpillar life. This is the story of Don's uncle.
Yes. Don's uncle was notoriously the black sheep of his family. He struggled for years with severe destructive addiction. He caused a massive amount of pain and chaos to the entire family unit. He was the classic cautionary tale parents warn their kids about. But very late in his uncle's life, Don deliberately went out of his way to visit him. And he didn't go to angrily scold him or demand apologies. He simply went to offer him pure human connection.
He just physically showed up for him.
He showed up. He offered what the authors beautifully term revolutionary love. And that single, quiet interaction actually shifted the entire energy of the family's legacy. It obviously didn't erase the terrible past. The trauma and the damage were already objectively done, but it fundamentally changed the ending of the story. It brought a measure of grace and healing to a deeply broken system.
And the macro application to us, to the listener, is pretty obvious here.
Humanity as a whole is the addicted uncle. We have been hopelessly addicted to cheap oil, to mindless consumption, to endless extraction, to war. We have caused immense, staggering pain to the biosphere and to each other. We are undeniably the destructive black sheep of the animal kingdom right now. But the core message is that it is not too late to shift the final energy. We can actively shift our daily actions from rampant consumption to quiet restoration. We can still mathematically redeem the cosmic legacy of our entire species.
We can actually rewrite the ending of the story.
We can. And that, fundamentally, is what radical hope looks like in action.
As we finally close out this deep dive, the authors leave the reader with a very specific practical challenge. It's a mental thought experiment they call the 9x21 harvest.
It's deceptively simple. The prompt is, if you knew for an absolute fact that you had exactly 21 days left to live on this earth, what 9 specific things would you do at that time?
I actually sat down and did this exercise before we recorded today. And I listed things like, tell my kids I love them, take a long walk in the deep woods behind my house, finally apologize to my brother for that argument, and just sit quietly by the ocean.
And I want everyone listening to notice exactly what you did not list. You didn't list, I'm going to aggressively check my work email one last time. You didn't list, I'm going to rush out and buy the newest iPhone on credit. You didn't list, I'm going to argue with anonymous strangers on the internet about politics.
No. When the timeline shrinks like that, all the manufactured consumer stuff just instantly falls away.
Right. So the author's ultimate challenge is this. Go do those 9 essential things right now. Today. Do not wait for the terrifying terminal diagnosis from a doctor to give you permission to live. But, and this is the key update, do them with the deep health of the planet in mind. Build that positive cosmic legacy starting this very afternoon.
So let's synthesize this massive cosmic equation one last time for everyone taking notes.
It is biophilic energy plus post-growth acceptance plus radical hope. Add those together and multiply the entire sum by the weight of deep time. That equals planetary survival.
The me finally matures and becomes the we.
Saving oneself and saving the entire world are, at the end of the day, the exact same dance.
That is a tremendous amount to process. Dance with the elephant. It started out sounding like a funny title for a kid's book, and it ended up being an incredibly dense, vital survival guide for navigating the 21st century.
It is a profound call to action. The Metacrisis isn't just a grim death sentence we have to passively accept. It is a thrilling, albeit terrifying, call to planetary adventure. The elephant is standing right there, and it is ready to lead. The only question left is, are you ready to dance?
And on that profound note, we're going to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about your day. We talked a lot today about planting literal trees for the unborn future. But ask yourself this right now. What is the specific apple seed that you are holding in your pocket today? Your unique talent, your specific, irreplaceable love. And exactly where in the soil are you going to plant it this afternoon?
Beautifully said.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. We will catch you on the next one.